The lowest-rung Marcus Reed wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the narrow maintenance shaft of Orbital Station Nexus 7. The artificial gravity made his tools feel heavier than they should, and the cramped space reminded him daily of his place in this alien world. 3 years ago, he had signed up for what the recruitment ads called interstellar opportunities. What they hadn't mentioned was that humans were considered little more than manual labor in the Valerian Empire. The station hummed around him, a massive structure orbiting the purple-hazed planet Valeria. Through the small viewport in the shaft, Marcus could see the planet's twin moons casting silver light across its crystalline cities. Beautiful, but not for him. Humans weren't allowed on the surface unless they were part of a diplomatic mission, and those positions were reserved for people with connections Marcus would never have. He emerged from the shaft into a service corridor, his maintenance uniform marked with grease and coolant stains. The fabric was a dull gray designed to make him invisible to the station's important residents. As he packed his tools, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Marcus quickly pressed himself against the wall, eyes downcast. 3 Valerian officers approached, their tall, elegant forms moving with practiced grace. Valerians were humanoid but clearly superior in their own minds. Their skin held a faint luminescence, shifting between pale blue and silver depending on their mood. Their features were sharp and angular, with large eyes that seemed to see everything. These 3 wore the deep purple uniforms of the Royal Guard, their ranks displayed in glowing symbols on their shoulders. "The princess grows impatient," one of them said in their musical language. Marcus had learned enough Valerian during his 3 years to understand basic conversations. The choosing ceremony approaches and she still refuses to select a mate from the approved candidates. "Princess Zara has always been difficult," another replied. "Her father indulges her military ambitions too much. A female should focus on continuing the bloodline, not commanding fleets." Marcus kept his breathing steady as they passed. He had heard whispers about Princess Zara Vex, the Emperor's daughter, who had shocked Valerian society by joining the military instead of accepting an arranged marriage. She was said to be brilliant, fierce, and completely unwilling to follow traditional expectations. After the guards disappeared around a corner, Marcus continued toward the service bay. His shift was nearly over, and he looked forward to the small quarters he shared with 2 other human workers. It wasn't much, but it was better than the labor camp some humans ended up in. An unexpected encounter. The service bay was normally empty at this hour, but as Marcus entered, he froze. A figure stood before the main diagnostic console, back turned to him. Even without seeing her face, he knew who she was. The royal purple of her military uniform, the way she held herself with absolute confidence, the silver-white hair that seemed to glow in the bay's lighting. Princess Zara Vex. Marcus immediately dropped to one knee, the proper position for a human in the presence of Valerian nobility. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, waiting for her to notice him or for her guards to appear and remove him. "Stand up," she said in accented but clear human standard. Her voice carried the musical quality of her species, but with an edge of authority that made it clear she was used to being obeyed. Marcus hesitated, then slowly rose to his feet, still keeping his gaze respectfully lowered. "You are the maintenance worker who has been accessing the deep systems," she continued. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Highness," Marcus replied carefully. "I was assigned to repair the cooling systems in Section 12. I followed proper protocols." She turned to face him, and Marcus couldn't help but look up. Princess Zara was striking in a way that made his breath catch. Her skin held the typical Valerian luminescence, but it was more pronounced, shifting between silver and pale gold. Her eyes were large and intelligent, colored like liquid mercury. She was tall even for a Valerian, and her military uniform couldn't hide her athletic build. "You found something," she said, studying his face with uncomfortable intensity. "In the deep systems. Something that shouldn't be there." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. He had found something during his repairs 3 days ago, hidden in a section of the station that the schematics claimed was solid bulkhead. Behind a false panel, he had discovered what looked like an ancient storage device, covered in symbols that weren't quite Valerian and weren't quite human. I don't know what you mean, Your Highness." Her eyes narrowed, and Marcus realized she could probably sense his elevated stress through whatever biological advantages Valerians possessed. "Show me," she commanded. The Hidden Chamber 20. Minutes later, Marcus found himself crawling through maintenance shafts again, this time followed by the heir to the Valerian Empire. Princess Zara had insisted on coming alone, dismissing her guards with orders that seemed to surprise them as much as they did Marcus. "Here," he said, stopping at a section where the shaft widened slightly. He pressed his palm against what looked like solid metal, but a hidden sensor responded to his touch. A panel slid aside, revealing the chamber beyond. Princess Zara moved past him with fluid grace, her luminescent skin providing enough light to see by. The chamber was small, clearly not part of the station's original design. Ancient symbols covered the walls, and in the center sat a crystalline device about the size of a human fist. "By the 7 suns," she whispered, switching to Valerian in her shock. "Your Highness? Do you recognize it?" She approached the device carefully, her hands hovering over it without quite touching. "These symbols, they're from the First Age." "But that's impossible. This station was built only 50 years ago." Marcus watched as she finally placed her hands on the crystal. It responded immediately, glowing with warm golden light that filled the chamber. Images began to form in the air above it, holographic projections that made both of them gasp. The images showed scenes from what appeared to be ancient history. Humans and Valerians working together, building great structures among the stars. Ships of combined design carrying crews of both species. And at the center of it all, ceremonies where humans and Valerians stood together as equals, their hands joined in what could only be described as bonding rituals. "This can't be real," Princess Zara breathed. "Humans are a young species." First, contact was only 200 years ago, but Marcus was staring at one particular image that had formed. It showed a human male and a Valerian female standing before what looked like an altar, surrounded by witnesses from both species. The human looked remarkably like Marcus himself, and the Valerian woman. "You see it too," Princess Zara said, quietly. She was looking at the same image, her silver eyes wide with recognition. The device pulsed, and suddenly, both of them were overwhelmed with visions. Not just images this time, but memories that felt as real as their own experiences. A love story that spanned centuries, a partnership between their species that had been deliberately erased from history. And at the center of it all, the truth about the choosing ceremony, the forbidden truth. When the visions faded, Marcus and Princess Zara found themselves sitting on the chamber floor, breathing heavily. The crystal device had gone dark, as if it
had shared all it could. "The choosing ceremony," Princess Zara said slowly. "It wasn't originally about selecting a Valerian mate.
It was about renewing the bond between our species." Marcus nodded, the borrowed memories still fresh in his mind. Every generation, a human and a Valerian were chosen to represent their peoples, not as ruler and subject, but as equals. "My ancestors rewrote history," she continued, her voice filled with growing anger. "They turned humans into servants and slaves, made us forget that we were once partners among the stars." The sound of footsteps in the main shaft made them both freeze. Princess Zara quickly deactivated the hidden panel, sealing the chamber. They crawled back through the maintenance passages in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they emerged into the service bay, she turned to face him. Her expression was determined, almost fierce. "The choosing ceremony is in 3 days," she said. "By law, I must select a mate or forfeit my claim to the throne." "Yes, Your Highness," Marcus replied, unsure where this was leading. "The ancient protocols are still encoded in our legal system," she continued. "Buried under centuries of amendments and traditions, but still there. A princess can choose any being she deems worthy, regardless of species or status." Marcus felt his world shift. "Your Highness, what are you saying?" Princess Zara stepped closer, her luminescent skin casting silver light across his face. "I'm saying that tomorrow night, I'm going to shock the entire empire, and I'm going to need a human, who isn't afraid to stand beside me and claim his rightful place. She turned and walked toward the bay exit, then paused. My name is Zara, by the way, not Your Highness. We're going to be partners, Marcus Reed. Time you started acting like it. As she disappeared into the corridor, Marcus stood alone in the service bay, his mind reeling. 3 days ago, he had been a lowly maintenance worker, invisible and forgotten. Now he was apparently destined to change the course of 2 civilizations. He looked down at his hands, still tingling from contact with the crystal device. Somewhere in the depths of space, ancient forces were stirring. The bond between humans and Valyrians had been broken once, hidden away and forgotten. But some connections were too strong to stay buried forever. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't imagine. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Reed felt like he belonged among the stars. Preparation for revolution the next. Morning brought chaos to orbital station Nexus 7. Word had spread through the royal quarters that Princess Zara had made an announcement to the High Council. She would indeed participate in the choosing ceremony, but she demanded the right to invoke ancient protocols that hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. Marcus learned about this while replacing power conduits in Section 15. The other, human workers, were buzzing with nervous energy. Nobody knew exactly what the princess had announced, but the Valyrian guard seemed tense, and several high-ranking officials had arrived on emergency shuttles from the planet below. Marcus, called Tom Fletcher, one of the senior maintenance staff. Administrator Kell wants to see you in his office. Now. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Administrator Kell was the station's highest-ranking human official, a career diplomat, who had spent 40 years learning to navigate Valyrian politics. If he wanted to see Marcus personally, it probably wasn't good news. Kell's office was located in the human quarters, a section of the station that felt distinctly second-class compared to the Valyrian areas. The administrator was a thin man in his 60s with graying hair and the careful expression of someone who had learned to survive by never making waves. Sit down, Reed, Kell said without looking up from his desk display. We need to talk. Marcus took the single chair facing the desk, trying to keep his expression neutral. Princess Zara has invoked something called the right of ancient choosing, Kell continued, finally meeting Marcus's eyes. Do you know what that means? No, sir, Marcus replied, which was technically true. He knew what it meant in general terms, but not the specific legal implications. It means she can select anyone she wants as her mate, regardless of their species or social status, Kell explained. The Valyrian nobles are in an uproar. Some are calling for the law to be changed immediately. Others are demanding that she be declared unfit to rule. Marcus nodded, trying to look appropriately confused. That's interesting, sir. But why are you telling me this? Kell leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus carefully. Because 3 different sources have reported seeing you in conversation with the princess yesterday, in areas where you had no business being. The administrator's tone remained calm, but Marcus could see the calculation behind his eyes. Kell had built his career on maintaining the delicate balance between human workers and Valyrian authority. A scandal involving one of his people could destroy everything he had worked for. I was performing routine maintenance, sir, Marcus said, carefully. If I encountered the princess, it was purely by chance. Of course it was, Kell replied, but his expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Reed, I'm going to give you some advice. Stay away from the royal quarters. Keep your head down. Don't do anything that might be interpreted as ambitious. Yes, sir. Good. Because if this situation explodes, I won't be able to protect you. The best thing for everyone is if you remain completely invisible until this blows over. The ceremony begins. That evening, Marcus tried to follow Kell's advice. He stayed in his quarters, sharing dinner with his roommates and pretending to read a technical manual. But as the hours passed, he found it impossible to concentrate. Somewhere in the station's grand ceremonial hall, Princess Zara was about to make a choice that would reshape the relationship between their species. At exactly 8 o'clock station time, his personal communicator chimed. The message was brief and unsigned. Service Corridor 7, now. Marcus looked around at his roommates, both of whom were absorbed in their own activities. Quietly, he slipped out of the quarters and made his way through the station's back passages. Service Corridor 7 was in the neutral zone between human and Valyrian sections, often used for maintenance access to the ceremonial areas. Princess Zara was waiting for him, but she looked nothing like the confident military officer he had met the day before. She wore traditional Valyrian ceremonial robes, flowing garments of deep purple and gold that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Her silver-white hair was arranged in an elaborate style that emphasized her elegant features. She was beautiful, in a way that made Marcus forget to breathe. "You came," she said, and he could hear relief in her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would. But I would understand if you chose safety over revolution." She stepped closer, and Marcus could see that despite her composed appearance, she was nervous. "Are you ready for this, Marcus? Once we walk into that hall together, there's no going back. The Empire will never be the same." Marcus thought about his life on the station. 3 years of being invisible, of keeping his head down and accepting his place at the bottom of the social order. 3 years of watching Valyrian nobles treat humans like useful animals. Then he thought about the visions from the crystal device, the memories of a time when their species had stood as equals among the stars. "I'm ready," he said. "But are you? You're giving up everything you've known for this." Zara smiled, and for the first time it reached her mercury-colored eyes. "I'm not giving up anything, Marcus. I'm reclaiming what was stolen from us centuries ago." She held out her hand to him. "The ceremony has already begun. They're waiting for me to make my choice. When we walk in there together, it will trigger legal protocols that haven't been used since the First Age. Are you prepared to be more than a maintenance worker? To stand as the representative of your entire species?" Marcus took her hand, feeling the warmth of her luminescent skin against his palm. "Let's find out." The moment of choice. The ceremonial hall was the most magnificent space on Nexus 7. The ceiling rose nearly 100 feet above the floor, decorated with holographic displays showing the history of the Valyrian Empire. Representatives from dozens of noble houses filled the graduated seating areas, their clothing and jewelry creating a dazzling display of wealth and power. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where Princess Zara was supposed to make her selection from a group of approved Valyrian males. Each one was accomplished in his own right. Military officers, scientists, artists, and diplomats who represented the best of their society. Emperor Vex sat on a throne-like chair at the front of the hall, his presence dominating the space even in silence. He was an imposing figure, tall even for a Valyrian, with skin that shifted between gold and deep blue depending on his mood. His eyes, the same mercury color as his daughter's, watched the proceedings with careful attention. Marcus and Zara paused at the entrance to the hall. Through the partially open doors, they could see the assembled nobles waiting for the ceremony to continue. "Last chance," Zara whispered. "No," Marcus replied firmly. "First chance. For both of us." Together, they walked into the hall. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as hundreds of Valyrian nobles turned to stare at the princess walking hand in hand with a human maintenance worker. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before exploding into shocked murmurs and angry exclamations. Princess Zara led Marcus to the center of the platform, where they stopped before her father's throne. The Emperor's expression was unreadable, but his skin had shifted to a deep, angry blue. "Daughter," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall despite the growing noise from the assembled nobles. "Explain yourself." Zara released Marcus's hand and stepped forward, but she remained close enough that their connection was obvious to everyone watching. "Father, honored nobles of the Empire," she began, her voice strong and clear. "I invoke the right of ancient choosing, as established in the founding codes of our civilization. The ancient laws were superseded centuries ago," called out one of the noble candidates, a military officer whose family controlled 3-star systems. "This is a violation of tradition and law." "No," Zara replied, turning to face the crowd. "Tradition was violated when we rewrote our history and forgot our origins. The founding codes have never been officially repealed, only buried under layers of more convenient legislation. She gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward despite every instinct telling him to run. I choose Marcus Reed of Earth as my mate and bonded partner, according to the ancient protocols that established this empire. The hall erupted in chaos. Nobles leaped to their feet shouting protests and demands. Some called for Zara to be stripped of her titles immediately. Others demanded that Marcus be arrested for presumption above his station. Through it all, Emperor Vex remained seated, his eyes fixed on his daughter with an expression Marcus couldn't read. The Ancient Protocol. Silence. The Emperor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and the hall gradually quieted. He stood slowly, his imposing presence demanding attention from everyone present. My daughter has invoked laws that predate our current civilization, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Whether we approve or not, these laws are still encoded in our legal system. They cannot be dismissed simply because they are inconvenient. He stepped down from his throne and approached the platform where Marcus and Zara waited. Up close, Marcus could see the family resemblance, the same intelligent eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. The right of ancient choosing carries with it certain requirements, the Emperor continued. Both participants must willingly accept the bond. Both must understand its implications, and both must be deemed worthy by the artifacts of the first age. Marcus felt Zara tense beside him. This was apparently not part of what she had expected. The Emperor gestured to his attendants, who brought forward an ornate case. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a crystal device identical to the one they had found in the hidden chamber, the bonding stone of the first age, the Emperor announced. If the ancient protocols are to be followed, then they must be followed completely. Let us see if the artifacts of our ancestors approve of this unconventional choice. He lifted the crystal from its case and placed it on a pedestal at the center of the platform. Immediately, it began to glow with the same golden light Marcus remembered from the day before. Place your hands upon the stone, the Emperor commanded. Both of you, together. Marcus looked at Zara, seeing his own nervousness reflected in her mercury eyes. They had come too far to hesitate now. Together they reached out and placed their hands on the crystal. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Golden light exploded from the stone, filling the entire hall with its radiance. But this time the visions weren't private. Holographic images formed in the air above the platform, visible to everyone present. The assembled nobles watched in stunned silence as the true history of their empire unfolded before them. Humans and Valyrians working together as equals. Joint expeditions to distant worlds. Scientific advances achieved through cooperation between the species. And at the center of it all, the bonding ceremonies that had maintained peace and partnership for over 2,000 years. The final image showed the original bonding couple, their hands joined as Marcus and Zara's were now. The resemblance was unmistakable. It was as if Marcus and Zara themselves were standing in that ancient ceremony. As the visions faded, the crystal's light dimmed to a gentle glow. But something had changed. Marcus could feel it. A connection to Zara that went beyond physical attraction or shared purpose. It was as if their minds had touched, creating a bridge between not just two individuals, but two entire species. A new beginning. The silence in the hall stretched for long moments, as nobles struggled to process what they had witnessed. Finally, Emperor Vex spoke. The artifacts have chosen, he said, his voice heavy with implications Marcus was only beginning to understand. The bond is recognized under the ancient laws. Princess Zara Vex and Marcus Reed are hereby declared bonded mates according to the protocols of the First Age. The political implications hit the crowd like a shockwave. If the ancient laws were truly in effect, it meant that Marcus wasn't just Zara's mate. He was now her equal in rank and authority. A human would have a claim to the Valyrian throne. Some nobles began shouting protests again, but others looked thoughtful. The visions had shown them a version of history they had never known, a time when cooperation between species had brought unprecedented prosperity. This changes everything, Zara whispered to Marcus as the chaos swirled around them. Yes, he replied, squeezing her hand. It does. Emperor Vex stepped closer to them, speaking quietly enough that only they could hear. I have been waiting for this day for 50 years, he said, surprising them both. My own grandfather found fragments of the true history in the Imperial archives. He made me promise to preserve the ancient laws, even if I never understood why. He looked directly at Marcus. You have no idea what you've begun, young human. The Empire will resist this change. Some will try to kill you both rather than accept a new order. We'll face it together, Marcus replied, feeling more confident than he had any right to. The Emperor smiled, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him. Good, because tomorrow the real work begins. Tonight, however, he gestured to the crowd which was slowly beginning to disperse. Tonight you celebrate. The bond between our species has been restored after 1,000 years of separation. As they left the ceremonial hall together, Marcus reflected on the incredible changes the last 3 days had brought. He was no longer a maintenance worker invisible to the galaxy's power structures. He was now bonded to the heir of an interstellar empire, tasked with helping to restore a partnership that had been lost to history. The future would be challenging, filled with political intrigue and opposition from those who benefited from the current system. But as he walked beside Zara through the corridors of Nexus 7, their hands still joined and the crystal's warm glow fading from their skin, Marcus knew they would face it together. The stars beyond the station's viewport seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibilities that hadn't existed when he was just another human servant. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and dangers he couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, the bond between humans and Valerians had been restored, and two species would begin the long journey back to partnership among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same.